12:15, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you to this session on REITs in Africa. So my name is Ivan Cornet. As mentioned, I'm the managing partner of Latitude 5, where I advise on real estate investment and structural finance across Africa. I've been advising and working on REITs and other fund type structure for the last 25 years now in emerging and more mature markets, including more recently in a new regime on the continent in Morocco. We have learned yesterday by from the JLL research person that 80% of the transactions worldwide are completed in a transparent market. And as you know, we don't have that many transparent markets in Africa. So REITs are really designed to unlock access to real estate investment through regulated and transparent vehicles. So globally, real estates are well established. In Africa, of course, you all know that South Africa is the more mature market on REITs. We're seeing a growing push across the continent for REITs. We have a good group of leaders on REITs on stage. So Kenya, Nigeria, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe are among the most established, I would say, REIT regulation on the continent, but we're also seeing new regimes. I mentioned Morocco, and of course we can mention Ghana also. What we're going to try to do over the next 25 minutes, it's really trying to understand what's working in REITs in Africa today, which are the best jurisdiction in terms of regulatory frameworks. What do you do to attract local and international capital into African REITs? And probably the most important one is really how do you deliver both returns and resilience in challenging market conditions. So together today on stage, as I mentioned, a good group of experienced leaders from across the continent. We have southern part of Africa covered, the east and the west. And I think what I will do is to start actually this panel, to kick off this panel, I'll ask every member of this panel to introduce himself or herself and share maybe their view on where the REIT market stands in their own respective markets. Maybe we can start with you, Rafael.
Thank you, Ivan. Good afternoon. My name is Rafael Mwito. I'm the CEO for the first listed REIT in Kenya that was actually formed, the very first one, listed in 2015. It's called Fahari iREIT. Now, where we stand as a country is with Fahari, we say we've paid the fees for everybody else because we've walked the journey. We listed with a number of properties. We've gone through the cycles. We've moved from what we call the main market board to more or less the private sector of Nairobi's Securities Exchange. We've done a transaction where we restructured the REIT and taken out a lot of the smaller unit holders. And really, in doing this, is responding to the market needs because we realized REITs in Kenya and the struggle has been number one, understanding. So it's been very poor, but we've done a lot of work with the REIT Association of Kenya just to educate the public, to educate pension trustees and such. And we are at a point where now in Kenya we've about 4 REITs, and we have a dual structure. So we have the income REITs and development REIT. Almost every REIT now that is coming is thinking of actually structuring those two, the development side as well as the income side. So that dual structure, we've seen it working very well with a REIT like Econ, and it's giving lessons also to some of us, like for us who are running just an IREIT. And we have about, give or take, about 7 other REITs that are under formation at the various stages. And that has been really propelled by the REIT Association of Kenya, which has worked on a very extensive toolkit to make it easier for anyone actually to just put up a REIT. So that toolkit is available. It has all the documentation required, the steps, and what we've been trying to do with that is just to shorten the route to formation of a REIT, as well as to reduce the cost structure of that initial setup. It's been quite helpful, and that's why we're seeing the take-up. And for us, as speaking for Fahari as well, we are at a point where we're also looking at the other side, the development side, just to be a feeder to the income component. Let me add it there because I know because of the time, we'll be speaking a bit more on specific items a little later.
Kambeu, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I would say copy and paste everything that he said. My name is Kambeu Banda. I'm the CEO of Real Estate Investment Zambia PLC, which is, again, in Zambia, the first REIT. We just got our REIT status in 2024. A journey for this company is basically a journey that started way back in the 1920s. So this company was established in Zambia in the 1920s as a cooperative, which has grown over time, changed in two forms. Was the first listed property company in the country, basically the second listed company on the Lusaka Stock Exchange. So a lot of history behind this company. And obviously setting up a journey to become the first REIT in the country. So as a REIT, currently with a market cap of about $77 million, growing. Our main objective is obviously to do a lot of acquisitions in terms of the assets that we see. More than anything, I think it's more around the consolidation of existing assets within the market. Because of the regulatory framework that the REIT brings to the table. The advantages that the REIT has brought to us, I think, is very significant in terms of attracting the investments. But like, as I said, copy and paste, the issue is around education and understanding, both from the retail investors and obviously institutional investors. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding around what really is this REIT and what is it all about. But otherwise, the journey has been quite interesting. Like again, copy and paste, we paid the school fees as well. I think I'll be the first member of that association if there's an association that will be created in Zambia because we're the only ones so far. We haven't heard yet of anyone in the country with a pipeline to try and join us in terms of the REIT journey. A lot of regulatory framework that is still being fixed. We started with the benchmarking of the Kenya REIT guide. We are now busy trying to get certain guides from South Africa. With the first one being a REIT-controlled company, which we're basically yet to finalize on, which is, I think, is a very good strategy for us, because what that means is that at a purchase of about 51% shareholding into another entity, that entity also gets a REIT status. So I think it's quite a big win for us, and we're busy trying to get that into place. So I think as a journey, we've done so far, we've done so well. We managed to get the REIT up in place. We managed to get 3 acquisitions of good assets into the REIT. Our performance has been quite good. Just performing for about 6 months in the first year of registration, we're able to declare a dividend and paid out dividends to our shareholders. First 6 months of performance for 2025 has been very positive. We've already doubled our performance for 2024. So I think it's something that is quite exciting. More than anything, I think our target is to try and see how we can get a lot of retail investors into the REIT. It's a very nice, I think, almost a mirror image of a pension fund to a certain extent. And that's the messaging that we're trying to take out to the market now so that people can start buying these units. We have units to an equivalent about $2 million that are available for retail investors and obviously institutional investors to buy as shareholding into the REIT. I think for now, I'll end it at here.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about Botswana.
Thank you and good afternoon or good noon. My name is Lesoho Kiitile. I'm the head of investments at Lotlelela Rona. I'm mainly tasked with growing the company in its portfolio and looking at structures like REITs for optimal capital structure. Now, although we are not yet a REIT, we are VRLS, we are in the process of transitioning, and I'm glad that I'm sitting on a panel with people who've already paid school fees, so maybe mine will be at a discount. I know that there will always be school fees to pay, but at least I don't have to look far. I just have to cross over to Zambia to check what I'm missing. I'm also very excited to be here. I think Lotolellarona is a real estate company. We are in a growth phase. We are looking to attract capital into the country because our mission is really to diversify our investor. We believe that there's great value over and above diversifying our portfolio. There's great value in having diverse investors. And for us, that basically means we're looking across the border for institutional and retail investors as well. So I hope that from this panel discussion, I'll go back home with a check, so that when we do transition into a REIT, then I have strong backing of foreign direct investment.
Thank you, Lesego. Vivin?
Thank you, Ivan. Good afternoon, everyone. For the first time in this panel, the only first I'm going to announce is that I'm the first one who is not the first REIT in our country. There are 11 registered REITs in Zimbabwe, of which 3 are already trading on the stock exchanges. 2 are on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, and 1 is on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So there is a first, actually. So we are the first dollar REIT. I can join the list of the first. So I represent Eagle Real Estate Investment Trust, which is a development REIT listed on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Our main focus is on developing hospitality and healthcare assets, particularly in underserved communities. We balance a bit of sustainability and impact investing. Unlike income REITs, we have got a layer of risk that we carry, which is development risk. And we set out to raise about 62 million over a 5-year period. So far, we are sitting on total assets of 29.7 million. So we're almost halfway, and we believe if we're to follow through with our fundraising strategy, we're likely to get there. So how we did it is we started off with private placement with institutional investors, domestic institutional investors who understood the landscape and who shared sort of the visions and the aspirations that we had. And we listed on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange in May via introduction. We actually did not do an IPO, and there's a reason why we did that. So the sequencing then is that as the property developments get to a certain stage, we've already finished one development in Mazoe, and we are at various stages of completion in Victoria Falls. So we transition from domestic institutional investors, and we infuse that with DFI money. And towards the 3rd year or so of operations, we then do an initial public offering. So not initial, but just a public offering to then bring in retail investors. The reason being that at these current stages that we are, it is difficult for retail investors to process and understand the risks, and neither do they have the resources to actually thoroughly understand and appraise the opportunities. So we listed in May at 15 cents, and we're now 10% up. There's strong demand. So in less than a year, we have seen 10% growth. And because we're a development REIT, I talk in terms of capital appreciation more than in terms of yields, because it's only when the portfolio matures that you start seeing rental yields becoming more important. But for the first few years, it's really how much you're making from the development process itself. So that has been our experience. The REITs market in Zimbabwe in June, the authorities were valuing it at about $77 million US. But we know that particularly the first REIT to come to market, they are talking of 100 million, which is to get represented here. So I think by the end of this year or early into next year, just one REIT alone we'll be looking at over 100 million. And if you add us smaller ones, we should be at about 150 or so. So it's fast growing, and we're looking at currently, we are 2.5% of the total assets under management in the industry. And I think we should be sitting somewhere between 10 to 15%. So I'm looking at a multiplier of 5 to 6 times from where we are. So there's a lot of scope to raise money domestically before we even start looking for external investors. So that's my rundown of what we're seeing in Zimbabwe.
Thank you. Kise, maybe you can talk a little bit about Ghana and Sentinel.
Okay, thank you, Ivan. My name is Kise Antonio, and I'm Managing Director of Sentinel Asset Management. They're talking about school fees. I guess to continue with that theme, I've also paid mine. First REIT established, I think we got licensed in July 2023, August 2023. Did our first acquisition, an iconic office building in Accra called One Airport Square, which was owned by the private equity firm Actis, $46 million transaction. The REITs, which we promote and our managers for, basically focuses on the commercial side. We don't do residential, so we focus on offices, retail, hospitality, purpose-built student accommodation, industrial, talking about things like warehouses, logistics, parks, data centers. Since we got listed, 2 other entities have been listed. So obviously the industry is in its embryonic or nascent stage. The second entity that was listed, it's a development REIT focusing on residential. Then a third one, which has recently been licensed, is a property company which is heavily involved in offices, a local property company, and they are collapsing into a REIT. Obviously, the promoter wants to unlock some value to do further developments. I think the REIT industry has actually been fueled by money from local pension funds. There's been pension reform in Ghana the last decade to a decade and a half. There was a lot of investments were skewed towards government securities. I was here last year. I talked about how the default of both our local currency and hard currency debts in December 2022 actually opened the door for our pension funds, who are obviously the biggest pool of domestic capital, to start looking outside what they termed risk-free and look at the alternative sector. There's a lot of promise for the pension fund, for the REITs or real estate industry in Ghana. I mean, if you look at the private pensions, I mean, we currently have about $6 billion in assets under management. And if you're to do a market sizing, you can allocate up to 25% of pension assets into what we call alternatives. And the alternative sector encompasses real estate, private equity, venture capital, and project finance. Okay? Obviously, I want to believe project finance and real estate will take a lot of those funds. And these pension assets are growing exponentially. When I was here last year, we had about $4 billion in that space. Obviously, the appreciation of our currency and inflows have helped. But talking about the market size, and if you have 1.5 billion, and currently we just have just about 0.3% in that alternative space, it shows the scope for huge growth, a lot of growth. Obviously, what has held that promise back has been the lack of products. And now we have pension funds rolling out these products. So I think we're going to see a lot of uptick. what we actually need and are lobbying for is for some regulatory induced action. Okay, we need to shepherd some of these guys, and I'm talking about pension funds, to be allocating more to alternatives and other asset classes outside government fixed income securities. And the plan is to get maybe some minimum allocations over the years. So if we're able to push for, let's say, 1% in the next 2 years, 2% after 3-4 years, that will shepherd assets to help build the necessary scale. Being the first REIT, I guess we've been a guinea pig, where we're doing the necessary experiments. There have been some inconsistencies in the REIT guidelines vis-a-vis the company's code. We have. So, every time we have to go to the regulator and say, hey, the company code says this, the REIT guideline says this. Which path are we to follow? Okay. In terms of tax laws, harmonization with tax laws too have been a bit of a challenge. There are a lot of gray areas. Obviously, with REITs, we are not being taxed at the corporate level. So if I'm not being taxed at the corporate level, I mean, my tenants will not have to withhold taxes, when they're paying their rents. But because it's not in black and white, I also need to always go back to the Ghana Revenue Authority. I need some paperwork. I need to go show. You make an acquisition, you need to find out, am I liable to pay stamp duties or not? The regulator will tell you, look, it's only your income. The law says it's only your income, which is not supposed to be taxed. So in as much as there's a lot of promise in the area, there's still a lot of work which needs to be done when it comes to regulations. I think once we're able to do that properly, with domestic capital providing that solid foundation, for the growth of the asset class, then we can start looking to bring international capital in to, build that massive scale. I always tell people we have a lot of assets, more than the capital we have. I get people knocking on my door all the time. I was here in South Africa, got a call, some people looking at a potential sale and leaseback transaction. Yes, domestic capital is growing, but once we get some foreign institutional capital, that will also help, build that scale and, meet the promise which I think the sector holds.
Sure, thank you. I'd like to build on what you said, but talking to Raphael, I mean, over the last couple of years, we've talked a lot about DFIs and pension funds being the key to unlock capital in this African real estate market. Do you think that for African REITs, pension funds in the near future are sufficient to build that capital? Or do you need international funders like DFIs to reach the right scale to, for your REIT and to be sufficient?
Yeah, so we have just gone through a strategic cycle, just planning for the next 3-5 years for Fahari. And part of what we're looking at is the sources of capital. And we actually looked at the setup of the Kenyan, especially institutional funds, that is insurance funds and pension schemes only. And our projections are that in the next 5 years, currently those two are sitting at about 2.5 trillion of capital. In the next 5 years, they will have doubled. So it will be between 5 and 6 trillion. Now, they cannot continue pumping all that money into just government securities. That's our thesis, at least, and we're seeing it panning because we're seeing funds, especially pension schemes, now looking at infrastructure funds, looking at private equity. So we want to have those alternatives in place for that to attract that capital. So we're saying, even if we just were to attract 1%, as Kisa was saying, just 1% or 2% of 6 trillion by 2030, that's a lot of money. We're actually talking about anything between 100 and 200 billion shillings. So we starting to look at $1 to $2 billion. So the funds and that will be ready to tap into that capital will actually do well, and that money will be allocated. And because we've been constantly speaking to these trustees, and we hearing them saying, we're looking at alternatives. Is it real estate? Is it energy? Is it infrastructure? And they're looking at all this. So, of course, the setup, especially in our market where there are no many dollar assets, we know that in bringing in international capital might be a challenge because of that mismatch in currency exposures. So our large target is actually the local institutions, but beyond the local institutions, we also know we have a very strong circle movement, what we call chamas in Kenya, in Swahili. And those are holding also a lot of money. And even for them, a lot of them actually end up buying a lot of real estate as land assets. So those just need that continuous education to actually be able to tap into that capital. But to get into that, what we've realized, we have to produce or to actually hold out assets at good yields, at double-digit yields, which we can do if we are developing. So that's the focus: develop good assets, then just sell them down to an IREIT at say maybe 10 or whatever percentage, and we retain that 2-3% as the developer or the development rate to distribute to your funders on the other side. So if we do that, we are convinced that we actually be able to tap into our sources of capital without necessarily looking outside our borders. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. Kambe, quick question for you. Over the last few years, we've seen in the real estate market currency fluctuation, political cycles, and other, I would say, more macro issues like the shift in demands for retail or office. I mean, as a REIT, how do you ensure that over the long term you are actually resilient in your portfolio and for your investors?
Thank you. Very interesting and good question. I think more than anything, you have to align yourself to what's happening in the economy in terms of the performance of the economy and where it's going. What is the regulatory framework? What are the opportunities that you're seeing in terms of what the government is driving to grow the health of the economy? We are a very copper-driven economy, obviously. We've been trying to get stronger from an agriculture point of view as well. We just came out of a drought, but we've seen a lot of infrastructure being put up in terms of supporting agriculture as well. Our mining sector has boomed to a certain extent. I think the copper price has been performing at a very good rate. We've seen a lot of reinvestment into the mining sector that is assisting the economy to move towards the right direction in terms of employment and just the revenue from the government's point of view. So as a REIT, obviously, in as much as obviously we don't take care of exactly the direct benefit from a copper point of view, you still have to align yourself with what's happening within the demographics of the economy. Zambia is a very young population. I think an average age of about 30 to 36 years, somewhere there. So you've got a lot of people that are still very, want to be exposed to good retail centers. So our strategic relevance, if I'm answering your question, is more around what exactly is happening in the economy and how do you remain relevant to make sure that you give out a product that will be acceptable and that will be sustainable for the investors from an actual return on investment. So our strategy is more around commercial. We're very skeptical right now about office because we've got a very small base in terms of the corporate businesses in the country. I think most of the corporate space in Zambia is very much controlled from a South Africa point of view. Almost all the corporates that we have in Zambia are coming from South Africa. So we look out to those. And then some of them obviously have matured in the country for quite a while, such that they've gone to a point where they've started building their own assets in terms of head offices. You know, the banks are busy putting up their own head offices. So if you've got an asset that was being rented out to a bank, there's a very high chance it might be a white elephant. So you have to look out for that. So we're very strategic around seeing that. So we've concentrated more around building or growing from a retail-based point of view. The Zambian REIT is obviously an I-REIT, which is an income REIT, so meaning we can only invest in income-earning properties. So we can't do developments per se. The regulatory framework doesn't allow us to do that. So in trying to be strategic around that, we're basically concentrating on an asset that we feel still has a lot of room in terms of growth, and also speaks to what's happening in terms of the dynamics of the economy. So the retail base is something that we feel we'll continue to concentrate on in terms of acquisitions. There's quite a lot of assets that are distressed in the country that we feel once we get them, we have the ability to turn them around and make them quite lucrative. We've got a case point of a shopping center called Arcade Shopping Mall. It was about 22,000 square meters in terms of space when we took it over. It's been in the portfolio for quite a while, but after we converted into a REIT, we decided to do a revamp on that particular asset, added another 3,500 square meters to this asset. Before we started, it was worth somewhere around $12.8 million. Now, with what we've done with the revamp and the rehabilitation that we've done with it, the asset has grown to about $28 to $30 million. So I think for us, the opportunity is to try and look for those assets that are distressed within the market, get them, work on them, and make sure that we increase the yields on them. Again, so to say, we are a REIT listed on the Lusaka Stock Exchange, and it's a dollar REIT as well. So when I talk about yields and our yield performance, we're talking about the dollar performance in terms of our yield. Right now, we posted about 8.3% in terms of our dollar yield, which is quite significantly good, given that we've only operated for a year. So to make it relevant for our investors and to stay relevant in the market, it's more around concentrating on assets that we see that have got room leg in terms of growth. And for more than anything for us, we feel like the retail space is something that we'd like to continue to grow. To expand away from Lusaka, which is the capital city, we were looking at Copperbelt. And then we've seen quite a number of assets that are already in existence. The players and the owners of these assets are trying to exit the market. We're a local player. We understand the local framework of how exactly the economy is operating. So we're very confident to basically get these acquisitions and see how we can grow our REIT.
Thank you, thank you. Lesego, can you just build a little bit on that, particularly with Botswana and the diamond situation that we're talking now? And obviously, I mean, the market's a bit different in Botswana than in Zambia. I'm sorry, I'm really pushed by the lady, but just in 1 minute.
Just in 1 minute.
Yes,
so,
thank you.
To piggyback off of what he just said, I think for us over and above looking at the macros and looking at the specific asset classes, what we try to do is look at the underlying income provider, which is your tenant. It's fair enough that you can secure dollar rentals, but if your tenant is not able to honor those rental obligations, then it becomes a whole other problem. So what we really, really stress, even when we're doing dollar rentals, is a counterparty risk assessment, just to make sure that they have the perfect financial health to support the income. So it's really just about the underlying asset for us, over and up and above the macros. We do have a specific or macro scope on what we call non-core asset classes, which is your healthcare, which is your affordable housing. I think our strategy was actually just validated yesterday by JLL's research, which was speaking to the demographics and saying that the demographics is just going to point towards special asset classes, which is where we are mostly focused on at LLR.
That's very nice. Thank you. Bevan Kisei, I think you're going to have the chance to finish this panel. Maybe a last word for the attendance. We can start with you, Bevan.
Thank you, Ivan. So I think what I would say from Zimbabwe is REITs are levers through which we can build a future that we want in as far as real estate is concerned. So in our view, when we are building these asset portfolios, we are working from, say, 25 years from now. What do we see? What do we prefer to be the living standards then? So when I'm putting a medical facility in Victoria Falls, one would then say, where do you get specialists? But I know that in future, with artificial intelligence, with improved data connectivity, with improvements in robotics, a physician in Italy can make an operation in Victoria Falls. But if you want to see the Victoria Falls, you have to fly in. So when I put that's how I build resilience. That's how we look at resilience. So we can say health share, we can say education. It's all about the futures that we want. And then we can do noise cancellation about politics. We can do noise cancellation about interest rates, so long as we can survive. But it's all about the future. Thank you.
Very wise words. Thank you very much, Kisei.
Okay, I see she's up, so.
Yeah. She's upset, I think.
Yes, so anyway. I don't have to speak much. But I think, like I said, in Ghana and across the continent, when it comes to REITs, there are huge loads of opportunities. Obviously, as a continent, we have a huge infrastructure deficit. Affordable housing, for instance, in terms of government power, you need to do this in partnership with government. Infrastructure-driven logistics, we are talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area. The last time I think I was reading, it's about over a $3 trillion market. That will drive cross-border trade, which will lead to logistics demand. Now everyone is talking about AI, so data centers. I think there are opportunities across board. And if you look at the demographic card as well, we have a young population, demographic advantages. I talked about us looking at purpose-built student accommodation. Right now, the demand for student accommodation is just humongous, through the roof. Yeah. What the campuses offer cannot accommodate students in any way. So the future looks promising, and I think in another, I don't even want to go to 20, 25 years. In another 10 years, we'll be here, and I think we'll have massive assets under management in our various REITs. So I think I'll end here.
Inshallah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Warm round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.